there are consequences to running a one-woman show. So this is a little disclaimer that half of the video for this interview does not exist. I was working with a new rig because with this camera here, there's a time limit, so I have to stop the interview to adjust the camera and then come back to the interview. And I didn't want to do that, so I was borrowing a different camera setup and didn't use it correctly. So half of the video is gone, but the audio is still there. So we're going to still have a good time. We were able to get an aerial shot too of the tea tasting portion, so you'll get to see some of the action of the tea. But just a heads up, like that's why this format looks a little different and why you're seeing me now in the future. This is Editing Steffi coming to you. I also wanted to do a proper introduction for Kat because Kat is an amazing person. Like she is doing so much in the world of CBD and women's health. Yeah, here's a little introduction to Kat. Kat Merryfield is a self-made entrepreneur, formulator, and innovator when it comes to the world of women's health and CBD. After graduating from Clayton College in 2006 with a degree in natural health and nutrition with an emphasis on homeopathy, she founded Kat's Naturals in 2015. Kat's Naturals is an organic CBD company focused on sourcing the highest quality ingredients while creating the most effective and bioavailable products on the market. She then co-founded Liberee, a wellness brand that focuses on creating natural and organic products designed to empower and enhance the well-being of women. The Liberee product line includes both CBD and non-CBD products to help reduce pain, increase pleasure, and support overall wellness. Kat's mission is to empower women to live a fulfilling and satisfying life through the use of natural and holistic products. She's also working on a new project, which we talk about later in the episode, so stick around to the end. So I heard about your company first before meeting you. I was working at Urban Market and Lauren introduced it to me because she was trying to get it into Urban Market and talking to Matt about it. And just like Lauren had such high praise, still has very high praise for what you do in the cannabis world. And so I think this would be such a fun conversation to have over tea about the world of cannabis and the world of like women's health and wellness, as well as along with your backstory and how you got involved in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for our little tea tasting we're doing today, we are going to do different pu'ers, which is something I think I haven't actually sat down and done like different pu'ers back to back. So this will be pretty fun. This whole setup is a Gung Fu style tasting. We have our tea tray here. We have our fairness pitcher, which the reason why it's called a fairness pitcher is because when you're tasting teas, you do such small batches, especially when you're doing like larger group events. You want everyone to have the same tasting experience. So when you're brewing, you'll brew multiple steeps into the fairness pitcher and it'll blend together. And then you pour it out and dose it out. Because the great thing about this style is that you get to have a journey with the tea. Each tea has a story that it's telling from like the first steep to the last steep. Yeah.
Sounds a lot like cannabis.
Yeah. I'm so excited to hear about like the overlapping like similarities in cannabis because it's something I've used in my life for my own wellness, but like I don't understand like why it works and like sometimes how it works and like why in certain points of my life it worked better than in other points of my life and like how certain like challenging experiences can make my relationship with that like a lot more complex. And I feel like with tea, it's kind of similar where it's like you'll love one tea for so long and then like as you just age and get older, you get drawn to new things and like different chapters of your life, you're attracted to new things. And I think that just goes with like anything in life, you know.
Especially in the plant world because a plant is a living entity just like us. And I remember back when I was first doing herbal studies and I heard about these spirit plants. And it was like a plant that called to your spirit and you would identify with it. And oftentimes you'd see it pop up in your life. Or you may see it on the side of the road or, you know, like it was like almost a guide. And so I feel like cannabis, tea, you know, everything in this plant world, it calls to your spirit when you need it at a certain time. And then you may be drawn to a different plant as you mature or going through different types of things.
That's so interesting. I love that, because I love the idea of plants being guides for us through life, because not one thing is going to work for you for your entire life, because the only thing that we can ever really count on is change.
That is true.
And so
plants are the best at adaptability through change. I mean, they're still here. They came before us. They will make it far after us.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, wonderful. Let's get started. So this first tea, well, I should probably finish going through the whole setup here. So we have the fairness pitcher. We have our Gai Wan, which means lidded bowl. And this was the first ever actual curated brewing method for tea back in China. And Jenny has this story about how when she was growing up in China, like they would drink tea after meals, and when they didn't have a Gai Wan, they would use like soup bowls that they like had just finished eating after. And she would talk about, she's like, yeah, and the tea was like oily from like the soups that they would eat. And then we have like our strainer, our little hand for our strainer, and then we have a tea pet, which you don't have to, but it's kind of fun. So when they were starting to make teapots out of Yixing clay, which is a region in China, they would have leftover clay from these teapots, and they would start making like little spirit animals, basically.
Oh, I love
and
it.
They would leave them on their tea trays, and you actually don't really want to drink the first steep of your tea anyway, because it's like you're kind of washing the tea first and like waking up the dragon, and getting any like impurities or dust or anything off the tea. And so we actually give it to our tea pet, and you can actually kind of like choose your tea pet based on like what you want to cultivate in your life. So like certain animals can represent certain things, and it's really fun. There's also like a whole like other story I just heard about where you give the first steep to your enemies because it has all the impurities. So if like they don't know, it's like it's kind of a diss if you give someone the first steep of tea, which I thought was also funny. So I think a lot of it's what you choose to make of it, but I like the idea of like you're intentionally setting like forth this feeling into your existence by pouring it over a certain tea pet. So I think we named him George the last like tea session I had with some friends, because he didn't have a name. So this is George the Fox.
George.
Yeah. So this is the raw pu'er. We have a camera up here too. So this one is from Mayleaf, and I'm going to cheat and read a little bit of what the tea is about off of the back of the bag here. So this is called Yonggushu from 2022. It's an ancient tree of pu'er from 300-year-old trees growing from Li Da village. It has notes of toffee, banana pudding, starfruit, pine nuts, and saffron custard, which I have really enjoyed. This is my first time trying this, so I'm pretty excited. But from other ancient tea trees that I've had, they're so complex in flavor because of the age. I find that it really is tapping into the history of what the earth story is. And it's unlike any other like type of tea that I've had.
Is it like grapes, where it takes on the essence of the region and the other plants growing around it?
Okay. Yeah, a lot of it has to do around like the soil and like the time of year, and like it's pretty fascinating, the world of tea.
Terroir.
The what?
It's called a terroir.
Terroir.
Terroir. Everything, like all encompassed, like the minerals in the earth and the soil and the air and the water.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was talking to someone recently and explaining tea to them, and I was like, it's kind of like wine. It's the Camellia sinensis plant, which is a singular plant, but it's cultivated in so many different ways that it makes so many different types of varieties. Like with wine, there's like so many different types of grapes. And so it's been such a great alternative for people who want to have a tasting experience, but they don't want to drink wine or spirits or, anything that could inhibit them, rather. So I've compared like tea drinking to like tea versus drinking alcohol, as like tea is something that you lean into and you are having a very aware experience of what you're drinking, versus I feel like with a lot of spirits and like beer tastings, it's like you're drinking to check out. And I think providing people like a tasting experience where it's like it heightens your senses rather than dulling them is
I think just something so nice to offer people.
I think that we need more mindfulness activities in our life because oftentimes we go through so much of life completely mindlessly. And so I started cultivating different activities, even like the art of bathing or, doing tea tastings or pairing like a cocktail with food to drink it for the flavor profile and how it can work together or to learn something new. So I love that, you brought those two together.
Yeah. So tell me more about like how you got involved in the wellness space to begin with and like developing this awareness.
Long time ago. I actually had no idea about natural health, really. I mean, it kind of was in the background of my life, but nobody really talked about it because we had some herbs. My uncle was actually a natural health practitioner, but he lived in a different area. I didn't have a whole lot of interaction. But my daughter got RSV when she was like 4 months old.
And what is RSV?
It's a respiratory infection that really affects the bronchioles.
Okay.
And she was so little. And so, she struggled to breathe. And they put her on a nebulizer, which is like this little breathing machine where they gave her albuterol. And because she was in this developmental stage, sure, it saved her life, but it also didn't allow her to develop properly. So her vocal cords weren't developing because this was constantly in there. Her bronchioles weren't developing properly. And she was just, we were now at 8 months old and she hadn't gotten off of this machine. They had said, her lungs would probably be inhibited for the rest of her life. She would go through asthma and things like that. And frankly, I did not find that acceptable. So I went to an herb shop that I had heard of in town and asked them, is there anything that I can give her? Well, it gave me a homeopathic and I gave it to her. And literally within 2 days, she was off of the nebulizer. Within 2 weeks, her voice had come back. She was no longer having any bronchial problems, no coughing, no inhibited movement. And I was like, okay, gotta know. And because I am the kind of person that I am where I have to immerse myself and consume all of the knowledge in that realm.
Right.
I found a school, enrolled myself in school, and ended up with a bachelor's degree in natural health and nutrition with an emphasis in homeopathy. So,
Wow, that's amazing.
and I didn't really have any real reason to do that, except I wanted to be my children's first course of medicine.
Right.
I was so disillusioned with the medical system and what they had not provided.
Right.
Besides what I've learned later is really more what it's for, which is hero medicine. She needed to be stabilized.
Right.
It was an emergency. They stabilized her, but then there was no solution for a long term. And that I found through the process of learning is actually all around us. So if we create our own preventative medicine and then only use the medical system for the hero medicine, we actually could work together. There is a purpose for both. We don't need to be there for every little cold and flu and symptom, and we don't really need them for long-term medicine if we work on ourselves in a mind, body, spirit way.
Yeah.
Lean into our plant medicines that are all around us and cultivate mindfulness, all of those things. And yeah, that's how I got started.
That's amazing. And we can sacrifice. This is to warm up our cups for.
There you go, George. He looks so happy.
I know. There's color changing ones too that are so fun. But that's amazing. And I'm so glad that you said the marriage between both conventional medicine and naturopathic medicine as well, because I feel like we live in a world where it has to be one or the other. It can't be both and it's so important to know what tools we have at our disposal for what time of our season or what time of our life. And so
I can definitely go down a rabbit hole on that one. Just
Please do.
I mean, it's about balance. And I feel like when we're young, both as a society and as a person, we believe in a dualistic environment. Everything has to be one way or another. There's the good, there's the evil, there's the bad. There's, like we have this idea or this system. But as we mature, both as an individual and as a society at large, we see that we actually need each other. Like when I was younger, I thought I needed to kill my ego. And it turned out without my ego, I actually can't record or observe my world, right?
Right.
So I need it. But then I was like, well, maybe I need to kill the spirit because I need this ego, but how does it have this place with my spirit?
Right.
And then I was like, but wait, without my spirit, I can't feel the world around me. I can't learn and adapt and change to the world around me. So, all right, guys, you got to get along. So we had to learn some integration techniques, and learn how to get along. And that kind of gave way to me looking at the world from a less like me against them. Even the things that I wasn't okay with, like I've had some soapboxes I can stand on, but that wasn't serving me or them because I can't affect change in them if I'm against them, if I'm giving them this energy, and I can't learn anything from them because there's got to be a reason why they're on their soapbox. So how can we work together is more of that. And I feel like plant medicine has been teaching me a lot of these principles because it takes up some of the worst toxins and converts them a lot of times before it even gets to us. So it's filtering this. It's filtering toxins for us so that we can breathe easier. And all of these plants and all of these things around us are giving us learning information. Like when you stand on a riverbank, like right after a flood, and you just see like the destruction. And you're like, how could these things possibly survive? And then you come back a couple of weeks later and all the little plants pop back up and they're all smiling and happy and ready to go. And you're like, wow. So those are the ones that are going to make it, are the ones that can bend. But all of these that stood too strong, these, trees and these branches that snapped and ended up in a snafu down here, they were too rigid.
Right. And so it's about like you said, it's an integration, but it's also like understanding how to have the conversation with yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think very much like how you were describing your early 20s, I felt like that was mine as well, where it was just like, no ego, just vibes, man. And then you realize like, oh, I can't do anything. So I have no personality. So I can't like actually like, I without an ego, you actually kind of understand yourself a little bit less, I feel like, because you don't know what you like, what you don't like, why you don't like those things, and like why you have disagreements with people, why you agree with certain things. And it's kind of part of a bigger conversation I think we're having as a human culture, because it's an election year and we don't have to get political, but I feel like the more we choose to opt out of the conversation, the more dis-ease we're going to feel. And I'm so glad that you've gotten into like the field of work that you've done and helping educate women specifically, and like how to rebuild that connection with themselves and that mindfulness.
And I mean, the word dis-ease, it's saying we're not at ease with ourselves, and it manifests on an outward form so that it gets our attention. So if we back that up to the educational realm, to, that place where it first begins as a thought, man, there's got to be another way. Yeah. Then we have that conversation with ourselves and the world at large, and we create a better way for ourselves first, which then bleeds out through a lack of dis-ease. And people are going to go up to you and be like, why are you so healthy? Why do you look so happy? Why do you look so good? How are you still having fun at your mid 40s or your 50s or your 60s? And it's because you have cultivated a lifestyle of balance and joy.
Yeah.
And that is harder to cultivate than anything else I have found in life. Ease and joy when the world says, you need to perform.
Yeah.
You need to do this.
Yeah. And also when, oh goodness, I just had it and I lost my train of thought. But the addiction we get to performing, I feel like that's also something
I've been there.
not being aware of is like, once you get into that place of like ease and comfort, you're kind of just like, okay, but is that thing going to happen? Because I probably should start proactively planning for when that thing happens, or like something like the other shoe's going to drop. That constant syndrome of just anticipating the next thing and like feeling like you have to like get out of this state of ease or comfort, or you feel guilty for being in comfort and like in a place of like peace, because it's like, am I allowed? Is this okay?
It's true. And I think that comes more often to women because we're taught guilt and shame from birth. It is like our little safety net for controlling us and making us well behaved and making sure that we, protect and keep the little children and we stay safely within the confines of what society has made for us. But, back to the earlier conversation about us maturing as a society, women have also matured in that desire to do more and to not feel guilty for it anymore, to not feel guilty for enjoying pleasurable teas or being mindful in their bathing or taking self-care methods, because we're oftentimes the ones that sacrifice it first. So if money gets tight, what's the first thing that's going to go? A woman's self-care, 100%.
Yeah.
When a child is born into the world, who's the one that's going to lose their job first? The woman. Usually. And it isn't necessarily because of anything other than just how it's always been.
Yeah. And
We're changing it.
It's been really interesting. Cheers, by the way. I feel like that banana, like custardy thing is really coming forward.
Kind of like lays on your tongue. Like you feel the depths of it just like laying in layers
Yeah.
on the tongue.
I'm picturing like almost like a checkered blanket on my tongue.
Yeah.
So I like that's like cooled down a little bit too.
And it's got that floral, like it's kind of floral when it first goes in, but then you feel those bitter aftertones that almost means that you're like stimulating your digestion.
Ooh. Could you talk about that more? Because I didn't know that like bitterness stimulates digestion.
Yes.
That's cool.
Most of the, like if you tried a bunch of random plants, the more bitter ones are usually have digestive properties.
That's why Jenny says more bitter, more better.
Yeah. And you want to choose some of the more bitter teas for an after dinner versus an aperitif.
Okay.
You want something a little bit more like floral or almost licoricey, like beforehand. It almost like stimulates the appetite, helps it get ready for the digestive process, make sure that no gas is going to form, and then afterwards maybe have some bitters. It's another reason why they put bitters in cocktails.
Okay. To help stimulate the
digestive function.
Wow. That's cool. Because we were talking about teas. There's a tea, Lapsang Sujong, which is a very smoky tea because during towards the end of the processing, when the leaves are drying out, they suspend it over a fire in a basket to like absorb some of the smoky tones. And it's kind of like, people compare it to like a whiskey almost. And we've been thinking about like adding bitters to that as well. So you saying that, like I was like doing like a mocktail with this tea specifically.
I did run a mocktail during COVID because
Okay.
people were drinking too much, and getting themselves into trouble. And, I know that it was, of course, part of the mechanism for growth, because the first thing when you wake up and you're like, oh my God, what's going on here? What do I want in life?
Right.
Our brain that hasn't been awake for so long wants to shut down. We do not want to think those thoughts. We do not want to deal with this reality. So
Yep.
we dilute it with alcohol. And I don't believe alcohol is bad in moderation. It's just the overconsumption which dulls the senses so that we don't have to think, we don't have to feel.
Right.
So we created a mocktail using a smoked green tea,
Okay.
and it almost had like a barrel whiskey taste, and then I
Yeah.
added a little bit of whiskey flavor,
Oh,
and
that's
then
cool.
just 3 drops of THC, and it was amazing. It
Sounds
was amazing.
so good. Do you have your recipes online by chance?
I do actually.
you?
On my social media, you can scroll through. I've got random mocktail recipes all over the
put it
Cat
right here.
Naturals social media.
A whole rabbit hole in itself.
Okay, so interestingly, like as this was finishing, like my last little drink there actually had a smoky tinge or like a barrel oaky taste to it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, was my brain involved in that? Like, did I stimulate my own
Yeah.
tastes?
That's so interesting because I feel like, especially with like taste and smell, and you could probably talk about this more than I can, but I know that smell specifically can like trigger senses in the olfactory setting and like signal different emotions. And so the fact we were talking about like an aged barrel tea, it kind of like makes it reminiscent in the moment. But I would love to hear like what you know about like emotions and scents and the olfactory system.
Well, it's actually connected to the part of the brain that stores memory, which is why when you smell something, like it almost immediately brings you back to the first place you smelled that. Like if I go into a basement, I immediately think of my aunt's basement where I used to play. And we used to, set up these haunted houses and things in the basement. But just that whiff from anywhere will bring me back to those memories. And, sometimes when we have like trauma, our brain will almost like store these latent memories of the smells of the places around us or what we heard when we were there. And so hearing something or smelling something will trigger that memory until it's fully healed. And then you may still have that triggered memory, but it won't be as, affecting to you.
So would you use smell or even taste to help with that integration process, with that healing journey?
I think that would be amazing, especially if you could reattach different memories, like a somatic healing journey, like drawing up good memories that may be associated and then smell that same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd want to do basement smell.
That might be a hard one. Yeah. I feel like it's something that, like I had a friend years ago who was like really into doTERRA oils, and she got me into doTERRA, and she would always be like very like mindful with how you like put oils on yourself, because you don't want to like oversaturate yourself with the oils, so then you become desensitized to them, but also like you don't want the smell to be associated with a negative experience. So like using these as tools for like when you're having your like sacred time with yourself, rather than like, because now like I have an oil that I really love, but sometimes when I put it out, I used to put it out all the time, like going out to shows or something like that. And now I just kind of, it's like tinged that smell a little bit. But it would be really interesting to see like how you can have a healing experience with this like one smell that might have caused one emotion into transforming it into another emotion. So
Yeah, that would be very interesting. I'm sure they've done a study on it. Like there's studies out there for almost everything. which is great because I'm always getting on the Google Scholar, which is like a search engine just for studies. And so that's like my secondary search engine friend.
What has been the most like surprising study that you've come across, or the like one that made like the biggest impact on you, if there is one?
This actually segues into one of my companies. And it's the lack of sexual help that women have. I was on my own journey to finding pleasure because it was never important to me. But then I read this book on how pleasure is connected to manifestation and how without pleasure, we can't truly absorb life or love life. And I was like, I don't know that I've ever really had pleasure. And then I was like, well, God, am I broken? Maybe I'm just broken, maybe that's the thing. And, that's just an excuse. None of us are broken.
Yeah, exactly.
We're just maybe not working on that place right now.
Right.
So going down that rabbit hole, hero medicine, let's do it. So went to the doctors, and said, is there anything to help me with like my sex drive? Because I've got none. And funny, they do have one pill, which kind of does the same thing as what it does for men, which is bring blood flow to the area, which isn't really a problem for most of us. Like that's not what's causing our low libido. But I didn't know this yet, so I was like, all right, let's try it. And then they told me how much it would cost. Insurance does not cover it. And it is like $320 a pill, which they'll only prescribe you like 3 at a time. But do the math. Now we're up around $1,000 for me to have maybe 3 times.
That's like,
what is that? What is that? So I'm like, but Viagra is at the most $8 a pill without insurance. But insurance will cover it. So then, of course, I'm like, hold on. So women's pleasure actually isn't something that anybody's really even thought about.
right.
And so going down that rabbit hole of why, if we haven't gotten there medically, either women haven't complained enough or we don't think it's a big deal. And
Probably
so
that
I
one.
started interviewing women. Like, what's your sex life like? Do you like it? Even if you're doing it a lot, what is your experience? Do you experience pain? Do you experience arousal? How much do you use lube? How often do you actually desire it? What are you doing to talk about it with your partner? And actually, it was as appalling as my own story. It was not a conversation. Not with their mothers, not with their partners, not with themselves. I met many women in their 50s and 60s that had never touched themselves, had never seen themselves. An overlording story is there is no desire for it, but they feel like they have to do it. Some have never experienced pleasure or orgasm. Most of them experience pain. Not all of them feel comfortable enough even bringing up the fact that they need lube, which means they're not being aroused or taken any time with, and they're having to do it anyway, which is creating trauma over and over and over with people we love. But without a conversation, they don't even know.
Right.
And then to open that conversation oftentimes brings up feelings of inferiority or jealousy or that they're not good enough. And I was like, okay, we got to change this dialogue. This is too prevalent with young people, with older people. Luckily, not as much in like the 18 to 25-year-olds, which gave me hope that things are changing. They talk about it more, but there's still no adults talking to them. And like in this store, you can be younger and I will talk to you as long as your parent is with you. We hosted classes and things so that we could talk about women's pleasure. Start with food, start with tea. Sometimes we rush through life so much that we don't even understand the concept of pleasure.
And like multiple different ways that can be enjoyed.
And we feel guilty. Oftentimes we feel guilty for enjoying our food.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
There's guilt and shame written all over our situation. And it has to start with education and communication and laying safe places for these conversations to happen. Because one thing that I found kind of interesting and is how many women giggle when asked about sex or when they see an item that may possibly give them pleasure. Or we talk about self-touch. It's like, oh, I can't do that. It's our body.
Yeah.
It's something we were gifted with that I didn't even know because I was taught it was shameful. You don't feel pleasure because our pleasure isn't required for reproduction. That's why their pleasure is more of the forefront because it's required for reproduction. Which actually helped me feel better about the whole like patriarchal thing because it wasn't necessarily because their pleasure was better. It's because their pleasure is required for reproduction. So it's still in the same like nobody really gets to enjoy this. We're just making babies here.
Right.
Well, why are we making babies? Isn't it to enjoy them?
Right.
And doesn't that need to be born of pleasure?
It's something that like I've had to learn how to have conversations with myself, but also like with my partner. Cause I had some like health issues that required like some attention, you know, in that area. And at first it was so hard to like admit to the fact that I was having a problem. And luckily my partner's very loving and understanding. And like we were able to have multiple conversations, ongoing conversations about like however I was feeling, how he was feeling, and something that I'm hoping that I'm glad that you're seeing a lot more younger people coming in and like being open to having these conversations. Cause hopefully that means like those chains are breaking, those like patterns of behavior through generational passing on is changing. And this can also kind of segue into, cause I know Lauren filled me in on your book project that you're working on. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it because I'm working on a project where I'm using shibari ties to illustrate the bondage that we have put ourselves in. And I came to that from this search for pleasure and realizing that there was so many layers to, you know, that whole narrative. And as a coping mechanism, I started like tying myself into like a shibari tie and then doing like random domestic chores so that I could feel what that felt like to my senses.
Interesting.
So
Can you
I
go
would
into shibari.
Sure. Okay, so shibari is a Japanese rope tying art.
Okay.
And I was drawn to it because it requires a great deal of surrender to the tire. It's very decorative, which also appeals to my senses. And, you know, it can be used to turn the thought process of pain into pleasure.
Okay.
Which, as a little bit of a masochist in my real life, I needed to figure out how to stop abusing myself and redirecting that energy. So I started learning more about these shibari ties and taking some classes and learning online and then practicing and I practiced on myself. And the biggest thing was like this practice of turning things I hated or I felt like was a bondage. And to me, like, I think life just decided what was actually best for me. And it wasn't necessarily all the things that I, quote unquote, would have chosen, even though it was the best choice in the end. And I did make all the choices, technically.
Right.
But domesticity was one of my least favorite.
Okay.
And so I was always trying to make it better for myself. So like digging into how to make it from scratch, and then I went all the way to the bottom of that rabbit hole and then came back up and I was like, I still hate this. So I felt like a slave. And it was because I had to do it. It wasn't that I didn't want to, but that feeling of I have to.
Yeah. That
If
obligation.
if I don't, my household's going to fall apart. People are going to be angry with me. I'm going to live in squalor, because nobody else is doing it. So by putting on that tie and feeling the way it rubbed and it squeezed and I couldn't take a deep breath, felt like that situation. But then if I changed my mind, I could feel the way the ropes felt a little bit sexy. And the knot moved in a way that could be a little bit pleasurable, just depending on how I moved and where I let my brain land. And so I started doing this with other things in my life that I hated so that I could change my brain from feeling like this is something I hate, it causes pain, to I choose to put myself in this. I can make it feel good or I can make it feel bad. But then at the end of the day, I can take it off. And so I started doing those ties for other women. Let's take ourselves down this rabbit hole. Tell me what you struggle with. At this moment, not, you may have already overcome things. We've all had the same story. We have the same path. It's just we work it out in different ways, right?
Exactly.
So then I would curate a bondage situation that could help them feel that and then kind of do a little bit of hypnotic coaching to take them through that experience. And then they feel it. And then we change the sensations and then I remove it and we talk about how that's gone. You control this situation. We control everything in our lives, even those things that we don't believe we do. And if we control it, we can take ourselves out of it. We can decide how we experience it. And then it lacks the power to hurt us. And so my book is these journeys, these interviews, the photographs, because it's everybody's story. It's not just my story. It's not just these people that are in the book. It's a collective story for all of humanity. And once we see where we can get ourselves out, the power is gone from things to hurt us. So we can actually choose there on out how we want to experience life.
That's so good. That's so good. Because I feel like, especially when it comes to a hierarchy of needs and survival, once you get past just the need for physical freedom of like not being like physically oppressed by like an evil dictator or anything like that. Once you get past that, then it's like we still create these cages within our mind that we haven't figured out how to get out of. And a lot of it is like self-induced because we think it's what society expects from us. And those patterns of behavior from like, oh, well, this is like how the roles have always worked, so we might as well keep it going,
Right.
you know, because it hasn't broken technically so far, but it has been fracturing. And so just the fact that you're creating a book talking about like taking the power back in a way where it's like changing your sensory experience while still in bondage, where it's like, well, you know, it's a choice of how we choose to live. And it's actually very similar to like an experience that I've had where like I was very frustrated with a job situation, and I just kept being like, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. And then looking at other options and like doing interviews, I was like, this isn't better. This isn't actually solving the problem of like, why do I feel like I need to get out in the first place? And then it was a intentional reframing of like, this moment right here is the best option for me. And I'm choosing to see it that way. And I'm staying because it's a choice, not because I feel obligated or because I have to, or, you know, if I leave, things will fall apart.
Right.
It's more just like, you know what? Like, I don't want to detour away from what my life's path is. And I think that's a lot of how we choose to like avoid things in life, instead of just being like, this is an emotion that's coming up, and like listening to that instinctively to just go the other way. It's like, well, let's like actually like face this head on for what it is. And it's like, sometimes like I had to tell myself, I was like, you know what? You just need to get over yourself. You just need to like,
Sometimes that's the best solution.
like we really, and it's sometimes just so unaware of like how we are getting in our own way in that way. So that's really,
And it's easier to blame somebody else too. Because I mean, if I'm in my own way, I'm the only one to blame. But I'm also the only one I need to move. So, I mean, it can go both ways. But like, I think the thing that hid the most in me was this victim mentality that I didn't realize was happening over and over and over, because it looked like situations kept happening over and over. They were totally different and seemed unrelated. And I was still moving in an upwards trajectory. Like I was still growing, but there was always this, why can't I get through this glass ceiling? Like, why do I keep running into these same brick walls? And then, you know, getting into this self-deprecation where I was like, you know, I'm not good enough, I'm not blah, blah, blah. And then it was just revealed that it was like, oh no, this is like a deep-seated victim mentality that I was taught through happenstance that went along with guilt and shame. Because those were my survival toolkit at birth. You know, it was like, here's a little guilt, here's shame. These two will keep you safe. But if you get out, you can always play the victim.
I would love to talk about that more, because I feel like there are certain figureheads in culture that have succeeded very well at playing the victim card. And I feel like that example gives so many people permission that, oh, it worked for them to play the victim constantly, so that works for me.
And victimhood comes with multiple excuses, which means now we're into projection, and we project our problems onto everybody around us, which means we never have to see ourselves. It is a grand survival mechanism. It really is. Like, we can keep ourselves protected for a long time, possibly even forever, depending on how many defenses we can build along the path. But if you practice mindfulness and you want to grow, this mechanism only has a shelf life of so long.
So do you think that there is and it probably changes depending on the situation that you're in, but like an allowed window of time for like being a victim for certain processing of emotions to then like transition into empowerment and becoming bigger than the situation you came from?
I think it would be like a baby, when you're young, it's just part of the growing process because it's something we're taught. We're taught by society. Like you said, there's major figureheads that have a lot of power, as well as our parents, as well as a lot of the other people that you're going to come across who don't want to take responsibility for their own actions. So it's a learned behavior. And when you're young, you can get away with it as long as something gets you out. But because it's so prevalent, there are very many people that will never get unplugged from that victim mentality. But having conversations like this, where it's an open forum, if you want to get out, you will eventually ask yourself, why does this continue to happen to me? Why am I seeing this pattern of these relationships that just go to shit at the end? Why am I never getting through the careers that I want? Why are my children behaving so badly? Why am I always broke? We have all of these things. It's a vein that runs along the interior of our lives. And so once we get to that point and we want a new solution, that's where kind of that idea of we control the bondage. We can take it off. And it's tough. It's so difficult to break the victim mentality because we don't like responsibility. We don't want to hurt people. I don't believe most humans want to hurt people. I just think once you get into that running from the truth, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper because then you feel like, oh gosh, this lie made me hurt this person, which made it worse. So I've got to hide this one. And let's just stop it all. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It's the past. It literally doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to repeat it in the future and you don't want to continue to hurt people, take responsibility for it so that you can learn another way. It's that simple.
And I love that I feel like your project with bondage is the very physical manifestation of like transforming from victim to victor.
Yes. Yeah. And I know that I needed it. Like I needed that somatic, illustration because I think it's got kind of like math, when you're a kid and it's just like, why are we doing all of this hypothetical math? I don't even understand what the A's and B's are really relating to, and we don't have enough experience in life to know that this probably is going to come up eventually. Maybe not, but for the most part, yeah, you're going to have to deal with algebra at some point. But having that placement in our early life goes, oh, that's right. There was this thing that I could go back to and learn about, even if I hadn't paid attention. So we can do the same thing. I feel like everybody's given guides in life. Like you'll run into somebody who just mentioned something.
Yeah.
Or you have a conversation, or you hear a podcast, or you read a t-shirt. The messages are everywhere.
Oh my gosh, there was a great one. There was a great one when I was working and I was just having a shit day. I was just like, I was mad and I didn't want to be there. And like this guy walks by and he sees me and he waves at me and he's going to PT because we're in like a medical building. And like, we didn't even say anything when he first walked in, but then he's walking out and he goes, "It's just gonna get better." I was like, yes. Yeah, man, it's just gonna get better. And I just like, that just like was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. And you get those like little those, like you said, guides along the way.
I've got some cannabis.
I was gonna say, like, a pairing could be interesting with like one of these teas. Like if there was one that you're like, oh, this would pair really well with
Peaches and
this.
cream pairs wonderfully with floral scents. Do you have a floral? What about the tangerine?
I think we might just skip the ripe pu'er and go straight to the tangerine, because I think that would be really interesting to try, and then see if you think that there would be like a pairing.
And I also have a couple of vape pens with me. I've got one that's called Happy with a cannabinoid blend. So one of my nerdy fun things that I like to do is I like to deconstruct the plant and then put it back together based on what I want it to do.
Yeah.
Even if it may not be something nature would give us.
So I think this is something great with the CBN that we were talking about in the car.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you get all of the separated molecules like CBD, THC, THCV, whatever you want. And then you put it together with some terpenes based on how you want to feel. So if you think about cannabinoids as the function of the plant, and then the terpenes as the feeling of the plant, then you can rebuild it to do what works best for you during that time. So the blend that I made called Happy is THC, CBD, and THCV, and a little bit of CBG. And then I put linalool, humulene, pinene, and what was the other one? Limonene, yes. So put those together, and it makes you just feel happy, but it doesn't make you feel super out of it.
Right. It's just like aware, and you're like,
Yes.
life is good, man.
It's my daughter's favorite blend because she's like, it takes the anxiety off, but I can still work and do things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And what did you say it was called?
I just called it Happy because that's how I felt. It was happy.
Just give a little rinse there.
Yeah. Do we get to give it to George again?
Yes.
Peaches and cream to me is enlightening. Like, it is a happy, enlightening feeling where I can get a lot of mental work done. I use that one for meditation for sure, but not because it doesn't shut my brain off. But it makes me be able to handle myself a little bit better with a little bit less seriousness,
Yeah.
Because I can get real serious about myself sometimes.
You and me both.
So I need a little.
Just a reminder. There you go.
And I just like 1 or 2 puffs.
Yeah.
It's so pretty.
Isn't it?
I like its little cap.
I know. It's just like, it's got a little hat and everything. So, yeah. It's just a little fermented orange. And then there's the pu'er inside. So they put it in when it's fresh, and then it naturally just like ferments and dries up. So, well, we're going to probably let it steep for a while just to like open up the first one. So we'll try a little bit of the first steep. But it's very fun. And it's very, what's up?
Do you want me to put a piece of that peaches and cream up there?
Yeah, bring it up here.
It is actually a beautiful flower.
It's gorgeous.
I have worked with different cannabis strains for a long time, and that one really piqued my interest because of the white crystals on it instead of like some of the deeper purples, and some will have like an orangey or a red hue.
Okay.
But this one, like, I would say the closest thing I really had seen to it was like White Widow, but that makes me feel too like dead inside. It makes me really sleepy. And then I've seen it on like CBG strains, but the colas are just beautiful and dense, and the smell of it. I mean, it smells fruity and citrusy.
Yeah. And you can just throw it right here.
Just right here.
Yeah.
I'll put it right in front
I
there.
think we should bring it into the picture.
Yeah.
And I would say that this one
Close.
is very happy.
Okay.
It's very uplifting, very enlightening, kind of creative flow. Like, it's great if you want to like take a little walk and just enjoy the things around you and just let thoughts come and go. And
That's so nice. So one thing I was like curious to talk to you about is like, I know like you focus a lot on women's health and just like wellness in general from more of a holistic standpoint. What do you find, what is the relationship between like cannabis and women's health specifically that was very interesting to you? I don't know if that is a good question.
Actually, I mean, it's a fine question because I'm very passionate about both cannabis and women's health. And when I was talking to women about like what kept them from experiencing pleasure, stress was big. If they couldn't get their brains to shut down, they couldn't really feel sexy. Another one was energy levels, because they're run down at the end of the day. Most of the time it's because we do too much. We're like overachievers, or we'll swing on the other side and just like not want to do anything because we're burnt out. So energy levels, stress levels, and then the other was hormones. So cannabis actually has the ability to help with some hormones, especially cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And so that's a big factor. CBD is great for reducing our stress levels. Oh, again.
It kind of is like, I don't know if it's just
like
because
a rosy sandalwood almost scent.
it kind of has the same terpenes almost, I feel like, as a cannabis would. And then again, I don't know if it's because we're talking about cannabis.
Yeah, right.
But it's very like reminiscent of just, those like fruity terpenes. That's very fun. But anyways, so
CBD, it reduces like our stress response, and it also helps to enhance something called anandamide, which is like our bliss molecule. And so it helps us with our reward and punishment mechanisms, which we're oftentimes super obsessed with, like this reward and punishment. Like if I do this, then I can have this. It almost shuts that down, where it's just bliss. Like we just feel really good. And it doesn't matter why. We didn't have to do anything to get it.
there's no reason why.
Right. And then, you have CBG, which is the first molecule that's born before it turns into all the other molecules. So like CBD is born from it, THC is born from it.
CBG.
Yes.
Okay.
It's like, so I call it like the little kid. Because if you can personify a cannabinoid, it's easier to understand its function. So it's the little kid. So it like enhances your body and makes it feel younger. Like it reduces inflammation. It helps it digest things better. You feel more awake and a little more energized. Your brain, your metabolism's running better. It helps reduce blood sugar levels. So all of these cannabinoids working in synergy create that function that I was looking for to help women de-stress, balance out their hormones, and get that, like head in the game, energy, feeling.
Yeah.
And then that was just kind of the beginning. It was part of the building blocks, because then I paired, the product that I ended up coming up with some herbs that further help to tonify your uterus and, bring blood flow to that system and to help uplift us and give us the micronutrients that most women are missing because most of our food is not giving it to us. And it's easier to assimilate in this extracted way. Then, putting it with some ashwagandha, because we are almost always in adrenal fatigue, burnout from that overachieving mechanism. Not sleeping. So these cannabinoids also with that ashwagandha, which interestingly, I picked one that did not give you a sleepy feeling. It's just extracted from the root, and it's the aerial parts that give you more of that sleep factor.
Okay.
So the roots are really just helping our adrenal glands, but with the adrenal fatigue being lifted and with the pairing of, taking down the inflammation, having energy when we're supposed to have energy, by the time you get to sleep, you actually go to sleep. Secondary factor, if you do smoke a little, sometimes you can dump your brain of the thoughts that keep running through your mind that keep us from sleeping. That's a huge factor that we want to shut off because we don't want to think those thoughts, especially at night. But when else are we thinking those thoughts? Because we kept ourselves busy all day.
Right. It's got to go somewhere. It's got to. That's the only channel that's on.
At the end of the night, you're like, oh, the fuzz. Cheers. Oh, this is a lot more mellow.
I thought it was going to be a lot more punchier than.
It's got a spicy, like almost black pepper taste on my tongue at the end.
Yeah. It's like.
This is nice. Almost has a white tea buttery taste too at the forefront.
Yeah. That pepper note was a good note. That like. I'm tasting that one predominantly right now with the orange. It's definitely more of like a spiced orange, more than I was expecting.
It's very good.
It's fun. It's crazy, like, you know, a few thousand years what people can come up with a singular plant.
That is true.
Oh, man. But so with your knowledge of cannabis and like developing products, like what were some of the first products that you wanted to see and like make for yourself, but also for like people that when I had a demand for something?
My love for the plant started when I was much younger and the only thing around was flower. To me, it was one of my spirit flowers because it helped all the people in my head line up so we could just talk one-on-one, and I learned about myself through that plant. It never made me dull, and maybe it was just because I was around the right stuff. I don't know. Maybe my brain chemistry. But it became one of my spirit helpers and helped me learn a lot throughout life. So when it became, I'm going to say this loosely, legal, in 2014, I wanted to use it for its medical purposes as an extraction, missing the THC, oddly enough, because it didn't affect your brain. So nobody had to worry about like not being able to function or having all of these thoughts when they don't want them. Mm-hmm. But it was reducing the pain. It was helping with depression and anxiety. And those are things that are generally not dealt with by nature medicine. And having been an herbalist at that point for about 15 years, I had noticed that that was what was missing. Like I couldn't help people who were dealing with depression or anxiety. And I couldn't help people who were in like serious chronic pain. And CBD helped so fast. And I was like, how has this been missing for so long? It's like the missing link. And then, you know, through educating myself, I found out that it had just been driven underground. It was once known. And then I started seeing a propensity for it to heal some of the things that have taken over our society now. And I kind of wonder if it's because now we've lived through enough generations that it's not even in our system anymore. Like our systems aren't being formed with that part of our endocannabinoid structure where, you know, prior to 1940, people ate it, their animals ate it, and then they ate the animal. It was prescribed as medicine. And so it was like in us. But just like through generations, that predisposition for something starts to go away. And so is that possibly why we're seeing an insurgence of stress-related diseases, of inflammation diseases that come from immunodeficiency, which interestingly, cannabis regulates our immune function and can suppress it so that immunodeficiencies don't happen, which is really the attacking of yourself.
So can you go into, like, for some people who don't know, the endocannabinoid system and like what that is and like why this, like, the insurgence is happening, if that makes...
Don't quote me on that. This is just a theory. All science starts as a theory. But I'm going to just state this in probably the most understandable way. So it's like we have all of the little snaps that you see in those kids' electrical snap kits that teaches kids about electricity.
Okay.
So there's little connectors that are in our body. And those connectors run through our bloodstream. They're in our brain. They're in our cells. They're in our skin. And without them, they just don't do their job. But as soon as you introduce those molecules, they snap into place. They complete the electrical circuit. And so they then antagonize other receptors that are found in our brain, like our opioid receptor, like the reward and punishment, the vanilloid receptor. It creates a whole string of reactions. And instead of blocking or supplanting that system, it's antagonizing our own reaction. So we flood ourselves with that which we weren't producing. So we function better. It's like a missing link, and it's right there. But there's so much fear around it now.
Right.
That just getting into that conversation, because there's so many molecules that you can use. You do not have to have THC with it. That is an absolute non-truth that was actually built on a marketing campaign that was done by the THC, like cannabis realm, that talked about this entourage effect. I thought that was funny when I found it. It was a marketing campaign a long time ago. And yet the CBD world started adopting that because it's actually easier and cheaper to use the whole plant. Not saying that it isn't great to have all of the molecules together. It is. But having one separately does not
negate what it can offer.
Correct. We actually have different receptors for both.
So is it different, like do we have receptors to meet each one of the cannabinoids?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a lot of learning that I had to do, because when I first got into the cannabis industry, there wasn't a whole lot of information here. And, there was a lot of the information was actually coming from Europe, because they never stopped studying it. Okay. So you have a lot of medical information that's come out of Israel, some of the best information. They studied these molecules back in the 70s, 60s, 80s, found out what we are now spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to agree with, which they already did the research.
Right.
Proved it.
They've done it. It's been...
So now that us, Americans have agreed,
it's like, yes.
It's starting to be adopted into our system. And then, in the Netherlands and that, Denmark, some of the best strains in the world come out of that region. They've been using hemp. They've been studying hemp and THC. They've been creating these beautiful, magical blends that make people feel better.
I was watching Bill Nye, like one of the newer Bill Nyes. Did you watch that episode?
I did not, but I love Bill Nye.
He did one on cannabis. And I think it was Israel. He or one of his people went to Israel and started interviewing some of the labs out there. And I guess part of what they do medically is someone will come to them with an ailment and they'll curate a specific strain for that specific ailment that is scientifically proven to like help them with it, rather than like immediately jumping to some sort of like lab made prescription pill, which has its place, but also like it's a great buffer
Right.
before getting to that, to see if there's a natural medicine that can work first.
Well, there's a company, I don't know that if they're still in business. I hope they are, because what they were doing back in 2018 was so phenomenal. They would take the results from like 23andMe and they would run them through the cannabinoids, and they could tell you which cannabinoids would work for you and which ones wouldn't. And then you could curate something specifically for your body. I wanted to work with that so badly.
That sounds
But the amount of
incredible.
money and the getting people on board with that, because, you know, I mean, it would be specifically for you.
Right.
So you may not want to buy a year's worth of this product that would be made specifically for you. You may not want to do the genetic testing and the expense to do that. But if you did, you
That
could
would be
literally
so
know
Cool.
if you were allergic to THC, or if CBD wasn't going to work for you, or if CBG was the one that was like your magic bullet, or if this blend would actually take away that anxiety that's been running through your family for so long, because they would track it with your genetics. Oh, it was so cool.
That's so cool. And you don't know if they're still around.
I don't.
I would be surprised if the technology is not going to go that direction. But I
That
have
just
a
makes so much sense. Go for
I
it.
have a question
Yes.
back there. I can't keep my fucking mouth shut. You talked about the different strains and everything that the Dutch and the Swedes or whoever were coming out with, the things that they're doing to help with what I would call the portfolio of the cannabis flower. Can you talk about
Look how
what
dark
we
it's
are
gotten.
absolutely screwing up here in America with the high THC contents, and why you believe, or why we all believe, that it's not necessarily just the THC molecule and how much you get, but the actual profile and portfolio of that one flower that is important for one who wants to use it for medicine.
Sure. So this is going to be a multi-layer answer to a multi-layer question. When you think about cannabis and the different molecules and the percentages, here's how this breaks down. It's back to kind of our metric system, which most Americans have not really been taught in depth, but it's so easy. It's just moving a decimal point. So if you have a 49% and you move your decimal point over, you now have 490 milligrams. Now, to put that into perspective, 1 milligram is, okay, 2.5 milligrams feels like a glass of wine. 2.5 milligrams feels like 1 glass of wine. 490 milligrams is going to feel somewhere around the 190 glasses of wine. Okay. 1 joint is 1 gram most of the time. So a 49% joint is 490 milligrams, or around 190 something. I mean, obviously I'm not doing the math perfectly. Glasses of wine, if I smoke that whole thing. How do I break that down at 49% so that I have an enjoyable experience? Personally, I can't, because a puff of that will send me to the moon.
Right.
Because I like a glass of wine.
Yeah.
That is my happy place. It's not everybody's happy place. Some people do need more. Maybe their tolerance is higher, or because of their genetic predisposition, they may uptake it a little differently. But if I'm choosing a flower and looking at the percentage of THCA, I'm going to want something that's closer to like the 13 to 17%, which is 130 to 170 milligrams per that whole joint. Because then 1 or 2 puffs is going to keep me in my happy place. Hemp, one of the reasons why hemp flower got really popular was because it was a lot like the old weed from the 90s, you know, that we were used to, where you could kind of smoke a whole joint and not lose your mind because it was 6%.
Oh, wow.
So you're not getting as much at a time. You can handle that.
Yeah, easily. Well,
I mean,
relatively.
I can handle 6 milligrams a heck of a lot easier than I can handle
400 and
right. Because, you know, if we're at 0.3%, I'm getting maybe 3 milligrams per the whole joint. So I can sit there and it's my glass of wine.
Yeah.
And my smoke.
And you said that's with hemp flower specifically.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the previous hemp flower.
Okay.
Because we found a loophole, as all deviants do. And THCA converts to Delta 9 THC, which is, for everybody who doesn't know, Delta 9 is the naturally occurring THC molecule. It's always been there. Not Delta 8, but Delta 9. So Delta 9 comes from the plant naturally. And when you smoke it or when you decarb it through adding some sort of heat, you're then transferring it into that molecule. So if it says THCA 49%, the minute you burn it, you're converting that to Delta 9. It's just not illegal. So they can put 0.3% or below 0.3% on the labeling as the THC.
Gotcha.
But it's good to be aware
that that's what's happening.
that's what's happening, which is great. I'm so glad we found this legal loophole because it shouldn't be illegal. It's medicine. It comes from the earth. We just need to know how to harness that medicine in an enjoyable way.
Yeah. And this is what we were talking about at lunch, where it's just like we need to reframe the conversation from getting fucked up to being like, how do we use this as a tool, one of many tools to heal and like be mindful about it.
And I think, you know, cannabis being the spirit helper that it is kind of got us all because it had this built-in mechanism that the higher you get, the more paranoid you get. So it was like a self-correcting problem. It's like, oh, you're not going to die, but you're going to want to. I'm going to bring everything to light. So you can't escape in it.
No, you can't.
So it cannot be abused in the same way that alcohol can. And it can't kill you. So it, even as an abused drug or an abused plant medicine, because I really hate the whole drug thing, but at the same time, let's just say most drugs are pharmaceuticals. So in that same vein, this drug already has a built-in
Like safety mechanism.
So abuse of it cannot occur long term.
So what would be some like say someone watches this and they're interested in being like, oh, I would love to like experiment with this, but I'm like, don't know how. I don't have anyone I can really talk to help curate my experiences. Like, how would you like introduce someone to cannabis through product or like recommendations on like where to look resource wise?
So I would say the best thing to do would be find something that has 1 milligram per drop. We make an aqua drop that's 1 milligram per drop so that people can find their happy place. So you take 1 drop and you add it to liquid and you wait, you know, up to an hour. It does act a little faster because it's a water soluble, so it's getting into the main bloodstream a lot faster. It's
Could
not.
you just like drop it in your mouth, I guess?
You
or-
can, but it's really not tasty.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
better to go into a beverage, like some juice or some tea. Like we could add it to the tea. It can go in anything because it's water soluble. And then you could add 1 more the next time. So then you're at 2 milligrams. And you can continue to do this until you find like, oh, I like this. This is me. Yeah. And I say wait 2 hours because that's in most systems, it will be completely enacted by then.
Gotcha.
So there are a few people who have the P450 liver enzyme that does not filter the THC. They can take massive amounts and it will never affect them, or it will affect them for a very short period of time and then it flushes out. So for them, they would have to smoke. It's going to be a heck of a lot less than if I ingest it. And it's not going, if I did ingest too much and I felt a little bit unstable for a while, it's going to last a quarter of the amount of time an edible is. So I take 4 puffs. I was really more of a 1 puff kind of gal. I'm feeling very uncomfortable, but I know I only have to be uncomfortable for 2 hours, so I may take a shower or go for a walk to help clear my head, because the uncomfortable feeling doesn't actually come from anything other than psychosomatic. It isn't really happening. We sometimes feel like we can't swallow because we're really parched. We sometimes feel like our hearts are beating out of our chest. They're not. If you take your pulse, it's fine. We feel like we can't get a deep breath. And that's because we've literally stopped breathing in and out because we're panicking.
Right.
So creating a little bit of a, okay, reality check, slow down. Take a little walk. And then that feeling starts to subside. And your body will regulate itself to that experience. So try not to call an ambulance. Seriously. You may feel like you're dying, but you're not. Even if you ate or smoked that whole 490 milligrams, still not going to die. There is literally no overdose that you can do. Your system just purges it.
Right.
You're just really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You may get a little nauseous, but generally the nausea is also coming from the overstimulation of our senses.
And it kind of goes into the idea of bondage, back into that, where it's just like, it's our choice in being comfortable versus like letting our senses override like being uncomfortable in being uncomfortable. And so it's like, it's actually a really good practice in being like holding space for that uncomfortableness and then choosing to see it in a different way.
I would definitely, if you're going to go through that, choose a smokable, not an edible, because an edible is going to last 6 to 12 hours depending on you.
Yeah.
So you're locked into that journey. It's going to be a long one. And oftentimes, like, the saddest thing that I hear is people saying, oh, I had this experience one time and I will never touch it again. I get it.
Yeah.
It's traumatizing. When you get into your head in that freak out way, and nobody's there to guide you through the experience, and you're stuck in it for 6 to 12 hours, you don't want to repeat that.
No.
But just like anything, if you do revisit it a little at a time. Let your body and your mind acclimate to it. See how it works for you. You may never need more than 1 or 2 puffs or more than 1 to 3 drops to feel exactly the way you're looking to feel.
And realizing it's very, like, you're comparing it to like a glass of wine, but also like the time frame in which you're going to feel it is very different. And so like realizing like you're not going to feel it necessarily instantaneously unless you're like inhaling it, but you will feel it in 2 hours. So don't take more than you know you can handle before the effects start to kick in.
And a standardized dose in the legal states that have been doing this for a while is 10 milligrams. So most edibles in legal states come in 10 milligram portions. And the packet is maximum of 100 milligrams. So your propensity to feel hyper uncomfortable is reduced. In our gray states, there is no regulation. So most of the edibles you see out on the market are 25 milligrams, which is almost 3 times what they're getting there. So overdoses happen more frequently in the gray areas because of non-regulation. Do we actually need government officials to regulate us? No, people, we do not. We need education.
Yeah.
So through education, just know that if you've been to California and you've had one edible and you freaked out, you probably want to do a quarter of that, which is about 2.5 milligrams. We're back to that 1 glass of wine again.
Right.
And then if you took that 10 milligram edible and you were like, man, I could take more, then you could probably handle one of the standardized edibles out on the gray market. So, it's just about learning yourself.
Yeah. And also, like, yeah, it's just being smart and not rushing into things, too. Because I feel like sometimes when you're, like, wanting to try things, it's like, I want to try the most extreme version of that thing so then I know what I'm getting into. It's like, no, just
Or
little
you trust
by little.
You trust it.
Right.
Because nobody's told us what a milligram means. Like, when you take Tylenol, do you know how many milligrams you're taking?
Oh, no, I don't. I should know.
Most people don't.
I should
But
know.
one pill is usually 220 milligrams
Oh, wow.
of acetaminophen. Okay, so most people take 2. Do we need 2? We have no idea. We never tried one. But that kind of gives us an idea of how much we can take. And on the label, it says take 1 to 2. We trust that because of labeling. So if I'm picking up a bag of gummies at a dispensary and it says 25 milligrams, take 1 to 2.
Get ready to see stars.
Right. But how would you know? You're trusting the labeling. And unless your dispensary person has told you or asked you, like, have you ever done this before? Mm-hmm. Well, how did you feel? What was your limit?
This is why you don't just go anywhere for your gummies.
Yeah. I mean, but how do you know?
Right.
And it's just, I think because you don't know, it makes a lot of people who could be using the medicine a little more leery. That's one of the other reasons why I think full legalization, so that we could actually have things like this on social media. The education would be easier to access because it's not that we don't know anymore. We do know. It's just hard to get it in mainstream because we've been blocked.
The things that Kat has done with the knowledge that she has and the cannabinoids, as you've deconstructed this plant, you have some really good ideas. One being Kat's Naturals, which is, lines of tinctures. You've got some gummies. But I think your newest invention, creation, as you spoke about earlier with women's health and pleasure and sex, is your Liberee line.
Yeah. Well, Liberee was definitely inspired through my journey to find pleasure. Because I thought I was broken. I've also had, I had cancer and had some of my parts taken out, and I had scar tissue, caused a lot of pain. Also trauma. We talked a little bit about how, trauma occurs to us even within loving partnerships. So we're carrying that. Our vagina actually holds trauma. Through stiff muscles, through pain points, pressure points. And the more we add to it, sometimes we can't feel it all. You'll find numb spots, or sometimes it's very, very painful. And so we have all of this going on. I've been to the medical community. Medical community is not helping. So then I'm ordering supplements online to see what there is. So I find that there's some suppositories out there. I'm sorry, people, but that's not sexy. It was really vile, actually, because I don't want weird stuff coming out of my vagina when I'm having sexy time.
Yeah.
And I also don't want, like, I was having flashbacks of being like a young mom, having to put suppositories in my kids, or, like being a child. And it was bad. So the whole suppository thing, I was like, I'm sorry, I don't care what it does for me. I can't do this. And then, I was trying different supplements, which mostly were geared once again towards blood flow. And I was like, I don't have blood flow issues.
Yeah.
If I'm stimulated, I can go. But how do I get there?
Right.
Because I can't let go. I can't let myself enjoy this, or I'm just too freaking tired. I mean, I was among the ranks of the women that were too tired, too stressed, couldn't get out of their head. I didn't have hormone issues, which was good. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I was just like, the last thing I wanted to do was perform. And it's sad that I had to say it that way, but that's how I felt. Like, sex was a performance, and it was an obligation. None of those things were sexy to me, but I was trying to force it, so I'm trying to figure out how I can force this, because as far as I was concerned, it was one of the things killing my marriage. I mean, nobody wants to be rejected over and over again, or feel like you're not desired. But heck, I didn't desire anything.
Yeah, it
wasn't personal.
Yeah, that's what I realized when I was having my health stuff. It was like, it's not just sex. It is like desiring any sort of physical. Like, I just didn't feel.
Yeah, you don't want to be touched.
I want to be touched.
Like,
Yeah, I was just like, no.
Yeah,
which is like it's good to acknowledge that that's the authentic feeling that's being felt, but also like you don't want to stay there.
Right. Along my journey, I was looking at gaps in a market. And of course, since I already had a cannabis company and I do formulations and I've worked with nutraceuticals and herbs, I was like, well, I can make my own solution. And so I started putting different things together and trying different combinations. And when it worked for me, I wanted to see if it worked for other people. So I started like passing these things out. And I loved the idea of the suppository, just without the ick factor.
Yeah.
And I wanted something a little more sexy because, when I am pairing this cannabis with it, our receptor sites are topical everywhere, which includes vaginally. So if I'm having pain in my vagina, why not attack it where it hurts, right? Yeah. And so at first, I didn't know if THC was going to work as a topical there or if it was actually going into my bloodstream. Because, we have the cervix, and the cervix is this, lovely window into this very porous, absorbing, womb.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, like, am I going to just get high accidentally? Which scared me because I'm such a low doser. So I started out, practicing on myself and trying low doses of THC in combination with CBD. And then I didn't feel anything in my head. So I was like, okay, maybe we are topical. So I tried like a 10 milligram. And it didn't quite get rid of the pain, but I still wasn't feeling inebriated. So I was like, okay.
Okay.
So I went up to 25 milligrams of each, both CBD and THC, and it was like the sweet spot. The pain was gone. I could use it before or after sex, and it would do the same. Like, it would either keep me from having the pain, or if I forgot and I had pain, it would get rid of it. And then I tried it for my menstrual cycle, and it got rid of my cramps, which I had never had anything that actually worked that way. And it worked better if I got it before, but it would, as long as I could keep it at every 4 hours, I was not having pain on my menstrual cycle anymore, which was a huge, huge difference to my normal life. So then I had to create a prototype. And I wanted probiotics in it because a lot of women struggle with BV and yeast infection, especially during your cycle because of the pH difference.
Right.
So wanted to get some probiotics in there, and I wanted some womb care and some vaginal care items. So, I'm creating this sexy helper.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need it to be small.
Right.
And I need it to not give a discharge. So I found a study, back to the whole Google Scholar. I found a study where they had done some research on gel caps inserted vaginally and found out that it was a wonderful way to give medicine intravaginally.
Wow.
And when it dissolves, which only takes about 15 minutes because it's dissolving at our body temperature.
Right.
Actually, a little below your body temperature because I think about 85 it starts to dissolve. But it's also protecting it. So now we have these wonderful pearls that I can insert vaginally. It gives very little discharge. It holds the medicine I need, but it can also be shipped without melting.
Right.
Because a regular suppository has to be kept cool.
Right. So how many milligrams are in each pearl?
This is 25 milligrams each.
Per-
Yeah, so 25 milligrams THC, 25 milligrams CBD, evening primrose oil, aloe, and probiotics.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Everything we need. And usually, I would say a normal cycle, I go through about 4. Because most women experience pain during the beginning of the cycle when the uterine lining is shedding quickly. And so if you, minute you get your period, you put in a pearl. And the packaging does come with a little inserter.
Okay.
But one of the coolest things I found was that they pop directly into the tip of a tampon. And they're a perfect size. And so the whole thing just goes in.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So you get the whole thing in, and then every 4 to 6 hours, put in another one, which is usually, one of the cycles that you would change your tampon.
Right. That's perfect. So does it, I guess, as long as you have a tampon in, it stays in and you can absorb it
always
fully. Okay.
Yeah, so
So even
when
if you're
you
wearing a
insert
pad
it-
and you have to discharge? Okay.
Yeah, because it takes 15 minutes to dissolve completely, and there isn't a discharge because there's so little amount that our bodies readily absorb it. You may see a little bit of oil, but it's conditioning,
Okay.
so it's actually good. And you want to insert it up against the cervix.
Okay.
So it's helping that localized area. But then as it's moving down, by the time it gets fully down, it's usually gone.
Okay.
It's absorbed.
Absorbed into the body.
But if maybe you have a little bit of a shorter canal, and you do see a little, it's not much. And it's all conditioning you. And it's all helping you. So it's actually a good thing.
That's incredible. Yeah, I remember using these and I was so impressed with them because they're unlike anything else I think I've seen, in terms of a suppository that has not only just the active ingredients, but also just the way it, like you said, it doesn't discharge, and it's just and also it's just such a great product. So was this the first one that you developed?
So this one was the first one I wanted to develop,
okay.
But because of all of the research I had to do and the prototypes I had to go through, trying to figure out how to make it look like this, this one was actually the last to come out.
Okay.
The first one was our lube.
Okay.
So our personal lubricant, it is safe for condoms. It's safe if you're trying to have a baby. We use a vegetable-based silicone alternative because one thing I was seeing is when I've used lubes, water-based dries up too fast. Silicone I'm afraid of. Oils, they erode condoms. And so, I was like, what do you do? Usually I went with coconut oil unless a condom was needed. And in that case, it was well, just throw on some silicone. I'm already getting nasties in me,
Yeah.
But I noticed that if I did use condoms on a regular basis, I would get yeast infections easier and urinary tract infections easier because it was putting all of that into me. It was changing my pH, which now I found out that most of the lubricants on the market, they steal water from you.
What?
Yes. And they actually erode the interior of your vagina. So there's something called osmolality, and it's the water transfer between that product and your body. So if the osmolality rate is too high, it's going to take your moisture. If it's too low, then it's going to like put too much moisture in. So you want it to be the same as the transfer of your body.
Okay.
Which is between like 270 and 310 would be like a really good rate. Mm-hmm. And I think it's based on the salt content of the product.
Okay.
So Astroglide and what is that other one that's used all the time? KY.
Oh.
So the one that your doctor uses, 10,000 osmolality. 10,000 when we're supposed to be around 270. So it's literally sloughing off the interior of our vaginas with regular use. Another thing I found out is that we can actually bring our own lubes to the doctor. Did not know this. But we can hand them a lubricant and say, you have to use this.
Wait, what? Really?
Really. I didn't know this because they don't advertise it. They want us to use theirs because if you read your little ticket on your menu after you pay, you paid for that. You paid a lot for that.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, but you can bring your own lube.
Okay.
So we know this now.
That's great.
Yeah, I had no idea all the things I was going to learn just from trying to solve this little problem. It was scary, but yet not, because knowledge is now power.
Right.
And now I have some alternatives, and so do we.
Right.
But finding out that, and so my product has a perfect osmolality. So there is no transfer of moisture. It is literally
The same.
sitting, it's going to help you. It's going to absorb what it needs, and it's going to be good. But it's made with hyaluronic acid, which helps to tonify as well. Mm-hmm. So it keeps that lining nice and vascular, and it helps keep it elasticy. All the things it's supposed to be.
Yes.
And then it has probiotics and prebiotics. So it's helping that flora. Mm-hmm. And then it is pH balanced, exact, so that no matter when we're using it, it's not going to throw off our pH balance, because that pH balance is very, very important for that area.
Yeah.
If it becomes too basic, we get yeast infections, MBV. So we want to keep that higher acid content. And most companies are using citric acid. Which isn't horrible, but lactic acid, we make it. So it's going to absorb into our systems a lot easier. Our bodies are going to know what to do with it.
Right.
So we use lactic acid to balance that pH. And it has CBD, so that it helps with the pain, if there is any.
Yeah.
And it's also helping with inflammation, which friction on a long-term basis can cause.
I mean, this just sounds like something that would just be good for like maintenance. Like, it doesn't even have to be during sex. It's just like actual vaginal maintenance. Because after years of of doing so many things that are against the nature of what our vagina is, it's probably good to like reincorporate like the natural elements and like bringing things in a balance. And that takes more than just like a couple times with sex using a lube. It's like, this is something that could be used regularly.
And we do have some customers who have started saying, I started using it because my doctor told me I needed to moisturize on a regular basis. And these women are postmenopausal that have been told this. Mm. And it's great, but what if we started younger? Could we avoid these issues if we started conditioning ourselves?
Right.
We put lotion all over our bodies.
Yeah.
Why don't we put lotion in our vagina? Well, obviously. But lube.
Lube.
Yeah. A good lube.
Yeah.
And then, so that one was our first product. And I had a lot of fun. I love formulating. So that one was a lot of fun. And getting the ingredients manufacturers to think outside the box was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because I had a lot of contacts in like the skincare world because most of my formulations were in skincare. And so, you know, I was like, I need a probiotic that maybe you guys have used for skincare, but is okay. Like there's nothing else in it that will create a vaginal problem.
Right.
Or I need this moisturizer. I need this silicone alternative. And they were like, we've never been asked if it's safe for vaginal use. And so they started digging and started talking to their suppliers, and they were like, have any tests been done? And we actually found one that it had been done.
Really?
It had been done, and that's the silicone alternative we went with. But they had done it for vaginal purposes for the reason that somebody may want to use this as a lube someday. And it just hadn't been used that they knew of yet.
Right.
So we used it and love it. I love it. And then the last product I made was a gummy.
Okay.
And that one was kind of like with the nutrients that I was looking for, except instead of solving a blood flow issue, which most of us weren't having,
Right.
I decided to tackle the energy, the hormone imbalances, and, you know, the adrenal fatigue, the inflammation, the not sleeping.
Right. All
Getting
the
your
things
brain in the
that
game.
could be more of a root cause
Yes.
to why you're not feeling pleasure in the first place.
And the biggest thing that women say is after you've used it for a full 30 days, you literally don't feel the same as you did before because the mood swings stop. You stop having these heights and lows in your cycle, which is usually normal. But if your body's working the way it should, you don't have those spikes and dips. It's just more like
It's balanced.
Yeah.
It's more like this rather than
and that made them feel more like they were in ovulation through the whole month rather than only having that tiny window where you're like, oh yeah,
Feeling
I'm
good.
ready to go. I can conquer the world. You know? But you have more of that. And then as you're taking this regularly over time, you feel better and better. But they're not super like tasty. They taste like medicine because they are medicine. And I chose to leave it that way instead of
trying to make it.
covering it in sugar.
Yeah.
Because I'm sorry, people, we need to realize that we're taking medicine. Yeah. And if it doesn't taste like medicine, it's not doing the work.
More bitter, more better.
It is. Like the tea.
Like the tea. Where can people find Liberee?
Online. We carry it on libereelife.com. And Liberee is a French word that means liberation. And it's actually spelled Liberee.
Okay.
Just so that they understand that Liberee Life is spelled that way.
Nice.
And then you can also get it on Kat's Naturals.
Amazing.
Unfortunately, we can't sell the pearls on Kat's Naturals because the THC content does not fall under the 0.3%, which is tragic. But
So-
you can get them through libereelife.com.
Okay. Amazing. Is there any other questions, topics, things? Yes, Lauren. Yes.
Just to clarify on the pearls, topically used,
Yes.
25 milligrams, you will not be.
You will never feel it. It does not get into your bloodstream. It is not.
Does not cross the blood-brain barrier.
It does not.
It does not affect you.
Nope. It's a topical.
Otherwise, perfect.
It is a topical. We actually did drug testing during the use of them, and if it is in you, the residue will come out onto a urine test. Even though if you test the blood, it's not in it.
Oh, that's.
But if we think about it, it's coming out of our vagina. It's touching our urethra. You know, you may see that show up in a urine test, but it's not in your blood. So after that couple of days where it's not in your vaginal canal anymore, you're not going to have a failed test. And so that was something good to know because we were like, oh my gosh, why are we not feeling this in our brain if we're failing a test? But it was because of that.
And for those that are going to potentially need to take drug tests, you are you have formulated a version of
The lube.
Just the lube.
Yeah. So our lube does not have cannabis in one of the forms. We reformulated it for people who could not have anything in their bloodstream, as well as being able to use it on regular platforms. Because CBD is still banned on Amazon for the most part, and you can't market it online or through social media. But instead of the CBD, we've replaced it with moringa oil.
And can you go into moringa oil a little bit more and like the benefits of moringa?
So it's very like good for conditioning the area. It's helpful for regenerating cells and helping with that vaginal area regenerate. But the biggest thing that I needed it for, why I had to replace the CBD, is for the emulsification process. Because most emulsification waxes that you would use for like skincare, they're not safe for the vagina. So I had to find an alternative that was safe. And moringa oil, before it's refined, I guess, into the oil that we usually get for our skin, it is a solid. And so it can be used as an emulsifier in small amounts. So there's less than 2% in the formula, but it brings the silicone alternative together with the other water bases, like the hyaluronic acid and the aloe, and the probiotics are bound in that solution. So I needed that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, it all just separated, and that's gross.
Yeah, no, we want it all
We want it all
together. I guess I do have another question. So for people, like for women with chronic UTIs, would these products help with that at all? Or is it something that can be used in conjunction with other?
Not help. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not going to hurt you. Whereas a lot of the products that are out there are actually contributing to UTIs. So they're making you more susceptible. So most women who are susceptible to UTIs have one or two things going on. Either they have a very short urethra, so bacteria is very easy to transfer. Or they're not flushing their system enough, or they may have a little bit of an imbalance in their nutrient uptake or whatever's going on in their brain. So it's coming out as disease.
Gotcha.
So if you find yourself experiencing the same things over and over, and you're peeing after sex, and you're only using the good things, and you're still seeing it come out, that's when you want to look at, what am I creating with this bondage? Am I holding a lot of trauma? And this gives me the ability to not have sexual encounters. This gives me the ability to take a rest. This gives me the ability to fill in the blank. But it may be something that you don't feel like you can ask for without creating disease in your body.
I think we're kind of reaching towards the end of our talk here. And I feel like we covered so much like amazing ground with this. And like, it's so like, it really is an honor to know you, Kat, because I don't think anyone else that is doing the work that you're doing with creating products and like educating people on the benefits of cannabis in a way that is able to be integrated into daily life without abuse. And I think that's just, we need more of that in the world. And I hope that you continue to
and now,
do that.
Everybody watching can also start helping with that. Because the more we all learn, the more we can also help inform others. Because one person can't do it all. And so I thank you for helping us get this started and helping it get hopefully into mainstream so that we can see a major change in the world, because it starts with us.
Absolutely.
We can't change the world without changing ourselves.
Cheers to that. Well, thank you so much for being here and for letting us in your lovely space. I know there's going to be some changes and transitions happening soon. So hopefully the next chapter will be just very fruitful and abundant.
It will be. Each chapter in the book of our lives takes us exactly where we need to go if we let it. And so I'm really excited because it's going to give me the opportunity to actually get into writing this book, which I've been talking about for a really long time, but I haven't been able to find the time. Well, my time card just got cleared.
Yeah, and we'll keep everyone posted for when that happens. It'll be very exciting. Hopefully this will be the first of maybe another episode. This is just the beginning of this conversation.